crimes. If any power on high recoils at such an outrage, let the gods repay you for all your reckless work. Grant you the thanks, the rich reward you've earned. You've made me see my son's death with my own eyes. Exactly what he said to Achilles, right? Defile the father's sight with his son's lifeblood. You say you're Achilles' son? You lie. Achilles never treated his enemy Priam so. No, he honored a supplicant's rights. He blushed to betray my trust. He restored my Hector's bloodless corpse for burial, sent me safely home to the land I rule. With that, and with all his might, we're told, the old man flings a spear. But it's not going to do anything to Pyrrhus, and Pyrrhus then will give him the comment. Well then, he says, down you go, a messenger to my father, Peleus' son. Tell him how about my vicious work, how Neoptolemus, the other name for Pyrrhus, degrades his father's name. Don't you forget, now die. With that, he drags the old man, we're told, out to the altar, quaking, slithering on through slicks of his son's blood. Wow. So it's compelling. He drags him through his own son's blood. And twisting Priam's hair in his left hand, his right hand sweeping forth his sword, a flash of steel, he buries it hilt deep in the king's flank. Unlike the Hamlet lines where it's on his head, it's here and he stabs him. Such was the fate, we're told, of Priam, his death, his lot on earth, with Troy blazing before his eyes, her ramparts down, the monarch who once had ruled in all his glory the many lands of Asia, Asia's many tribes. A powerful trunk is lying on the shore, the head wrenched from the shoulders, and there it is at 692, a corpse without a name. If we're looking for symbolism, here we can find it. Priam is in fact a symbol of Troy, and it's over, isn't it? Then Aeneid says it. For the first time, the full horror, notice how many times that word gets used in this book, came home to me at last. I froze. The thought of my own dear father filled my mind when I saw the old king gasping out his life with that raw wound. Both men were the same age. And the thought of my Creusa alone, abandoned, our house plundered, our little Elias's fate, the other name for Ascanius. I look back. What forces still stood by me? None. Aeneas, a man alone. Totally spent in war, they're all deserted. Down from the roofs they flung themselves to earth or hurled their broken bodies in the flames. So, just at that moment, I was the one man left, and then I saw her. We don't get for several lines that who he sees is Helen. Clinging to Vesta's threshold, hiding in silence, tucked away. Helen of Argos, glare of the fires lit my view as I looked down, scanning the city left and right, and there she was. Terrified of the Trojans' hate now. Troy was overpowered. Terrified of the Greeks' revenge, her deserted husband's rage, that universal fury, a curse to Troy and her native land, and here she lurked, skulking, a thing of loathing cowering at the altar. And then finally we get the word, Helen. Out it flared, the fire inside my soul, my rage ablaze to avenge our fallen country. Pay Helen back, crime for crime. That is to say, I'm going to punish her. No fame, no memory to be won for punishing a woman. Such victory reaps no praise, but to stamp this abomination out as she deserves, to punish her now. They'll sing my praise for that. What joy, he says, to glut my heart with the fires of vengeance, bring some peace to the ashes of my people. However, Venus shows up, his mother, and she says, my son, 735, my son, what grief could incite such blazing anger? Why such fury? And the love you bore me once, where's it all gone? Why don't you look first where you left your father, Anchises spent with age? Do your wife Creusa and son Ascanius still survive? In other words, what are you doing worrying about Helen? The Greek battalions are swarming round them all, and if my love had never rushed to the rescue, flames would have swept them off by now, or enemy sword blades would have drained their blood. Think! It's not that beauty, Helen, you should hate, not even Paris, the man that you should blame. No, it's the gods, the ruthless gods who are tearing down the wealth of Troy, her toppling crown of towers. In other words, don't blame Helen in Paris, blame the gods. Of course, which gods? Namely, of course, Venus, Aphrodite. She's the one who won the golden apple and, of course, set all of this up with the judgment of Paris. The ironies run deep. She then says, I'll sweep it all away. The mist so murky, dark, and swirling round you now. It clouds your vision, dulls your moral sight. You are my son. Never fear my orders. Never refuse to bow to my commands. And then she lifts it, and in one of the more compelling moments in all of literature, he gets to see the gods destroying Troy. Neptune making the walls quake. Juno with the sword at her hip, mustering her comrades. Minerva, Athena, Pallas Athena, with her savage Gorgon glaring, and she says it. And Jupiter is saying, "Go, go! Let's destroy the city. Run for your life," she says, "my son." And then he says it. I saw it all at line 771. I saw it all Ilium, settling into her embers. Neptune's Troy, toppling over now from her roots, like a proud and take a look at this compelling simile. What's it like when a great civilization falls, right? I mean, it's like I've said to you guys often, when we study in our sophomore year world history, it's fascinating that we overlook that simple truth, that at the end of every unit, it's the fall of a civilization, and then the rise of the next civilization. And of course, any powerful civilization that reads these lines has got to say, wow, yeah, this is disturbing. Troy never thought it would fall, but like a proud veteran ash on its mountain summit, chopped by stroke of huge tree, chopped by stroke after stroke of the iron axe, as the woodsmen fight to bring it down, and over it threatens to fall, its boughs shudder, its leafy crown quakes, and back and forth it sways, till overwhelmed by its wounds, with a long last groan it goes. Torn up from its heights, it crashes down in ruins from its ridge. There it is. Well, there he goes. At last he says, I'm at my father's house. It was his first concern, he says, to find the man, to find his father. We think about this in relationship to Odysseus, who saves his father Laertes in the Odyssey for last. Anchises immediately is ready to die, doesn't want to suffer exile. He says, enough. He says, I'm going to die. Aeneas will then say, and rushing for his arms at 8:12, 8:13, well, then I'm ready to die as well. He says it at line 8:30, arms, my comrade, bring me arms, I'm ready to go. And he's buckling on the arms, just as he says, I was rushing out. Right at the door's my wife, Creusa, look, flung herself at my feet and hugged my knees, reminding us very much of the exchange between Hector and Andromache in Iliad 6, right? And raised our little Ilias up to his father, the son. If you're going off to die, she begged, then take us with you too, to face the worst together. But if your battles teach you to hope in arms, the arms you buckle on, your first duty should be to guard our house. Desert us? Leave us now? To whom? Whom, she asks. Little Ilias, your father and your wife? So I was once called. The ironies, of course, is that Creusa will, in fact, be lost. Then we have this amazing omen that will remind us of our reading of Acts 2, verse 3. You have this blue fire, a tongue of fire, that appears right over Ilias's head, and that's enough. And Anchises immediately will ask for one more sign. No sooner we get this instant peal of thunder that clashes on the left, and down the sky a shooting star comes gliding. By the way, for the Romans, the omen happens on the left, and that's good. For the Greeks, it was on the right, as we talked about in our study of the Iliad and the Odyssey. The holy star will alight on the forests of Mount Ida, outside of Troy, and that's it. He says, Anchises says, I'm with you, he says, safeguard our house, safeguard my grandson Ilias, this sign is yours. Troy rests in your power. I give way, my son. And off they go. Of course, we cannot but be reminded of the final, almost said act, the final book of the Odyssey, where you have Laertes with his boy Odysseus, with his boy Telemachus. Here you have Anchises with, of course, Aeneas, with the son Ilias, right? So it's all right there. And then at line 880, so come, dear father, climb up onto my shoulders, I'll carry you on my back, this labor of love will never wear me down. Whatever falls to us now, we both will share one peril, one path to safety. Little Ilias will walk beside me, and you, my wife, follow me at a distance in my footsteps. And of course, it's always been the question, well, why in heaven's name would he put her behind him? I think that, of course, within the context of the story, we're aware that, well, he's got to lose his wife so that he can get another wife, and ultimately when he arrives in Italy, right? And he can't fall in love with Dido and have a relationship with Dido, obviously, if his wife's still alive and with him, at least not so cleanly. They make a decision about where they're going to meet, and then the household gods are carried by Anchises himself. Aeneas will say, I can't handle them because I've got blood on my hands. and they leave in the dark. And right as they are leaving, the Greeks are coming, and Anchises will say for it, "Run for it now, boy, you must," at line 9-10. They're closing in. He says, "I can see them." Then he says it, in my panic, "Something strange, some enemy power robbed me of my senses. Lost. I was leaving behind familiar paths." It's a compelling line. "I was leaving behind familiar paths, at a run down blind in deads, when, oh dear God, my wife Creusa, torn from me by a brutal fate. What then? Did she stop in her tracks, or lose her way, or exhausted sink down to rest? Who knows? I never set my eyes on her again. I never looked back. She never crossed my mind. Creusa, lost. Not till we reached that barrow sacred to ancient Croesus, where, with all our people, rallied at last, she alone was missing. Lost. Gone forever. Raving, I blamed them all. The gods, the human race. What crueler blow did I feel that night that Troy went down?" He goes back into the city, back to his house. It does show what kind of man he is. Of course, the Dido, who is, again, she's falling in love because of Venus's great help. Dido is falling in love as Aeneas is speaking these words. But she's like, wow, what kind of man? That's a good guy. He goes back and looks for his wife. "On I go," he says at 9:41. "On I go. I see the palace of Priam set on the heights, but there in colonnades, deserted now, in the sanctuary of Juno. There stand the elite watchmen. Phinox, ruthless Ulysses," you'll remember those are the two that went to get Achilles in Iliad 9, right? "Guarding all their loot, all the treasures of Troy." We're reminded that this was one of the things that was constantly talked about in the Iliad, is when we finally get inside the walls of Troy, we're going to get all kinds of Scooby snacks, right? All kinds of Team A, you'll remember. "The sacramental tables, bowls of solid gold, and the holy robes they seized." We're back to the robes of the Iliad, as we commented for so many times. "From every quarter, Greeks piling high the plunder, children and trembling mothers rounded up in a long, endless line." And we're reminded that so often the Greeks would say that what they wanted were the women of Troy. He shouts even, he says, for Creusa. And then all of a sudden, her stricken ghost at line 9:57. "My own Creusa shade, but larger than life, the life I'd known so well." We're reminded, of course, of Odysseus speaking to his mother in the Odyssey in the underworld in Book 11. "I froze. My hackles bristled. Voice choked in my throat. And my wife spoke out to ease me of my anguish. 'My dear husband,' she says, 'why so eager to give yourself to such mad flights of grief? It's not without the will of the gods these things have come to pass.'" Notice we're always going back to the will of the gods and fate. "But the gods forbid you to take Creusa with you, bound from Troy together. The king of lofty Olympus won't allow it." And then she says it. "A long exile is your fate. The vast plains of the sea are yours to plow, until you reach Hesperian land, where leaden Tiber flows with its smooth march through rich and loamy fields, a land of hardy people." In other words, you got to keep going until you end up in Italy. He's telling Dido this. She cannot be shocked later when he decides to bolt, right? "There, great joy and a kingdom are yours to claim, and a queen to make your wife." He tells Dido this in his story. "Dispel your tears for Creusa whom you love. I will never behold the high and mighty pride of their palaces, the Myrmidons, the Dolphians, or go as a slave to some Greek matron. No, not I, daughter of Dardanus that I am, the wife of Venus' son. The great mother of gods detains me on these shores. And now, farewell, hold dear the son we share, we love together. Take care of our boy," in other words. He tries to hug his wife, Creusa, but he can't, in the same way that Odysseus couldn't hug his mother. And then the word is gone. "And at last the night was over. Back I went to my people, gathered for exile, ready to be led. The Greeks had taken the city, blocked off every gate. No hope of rescue now. So I gave way at last, and lifting my father, headed towards the mountains." Of course, this is going to be ironic on so many counts. Think about it. In Aeneid 6, line 525, Aeneas will in fact meet the fair Dido in the underworld, in the same way that he met his ghost of his wife. All right, well, let's talk really quickly level 2 and 3. This is, of course, beautiful stuff. Level 2A, major messages. Think about this one. All great civilizations, all great nations, they have to come to their end. That's the message of this text, which is ironic given that this is a Roman poem. Of course, to continue with that, great civilizations are certain that it can happen. Troy was so certain that its walls would protect them. But notice another major message. Even in doom, Aeneas is ready to show courage and to be a leader. And the other interesting idea is that to go forward, sometimes you have to leave what's behind. He's able to take some of the things from his past. That's, of course, the symbolism. So let's play that game really quickly. The city of Troy is obviously a powerful symbol. It's burning. It's being destroyed. Aeneas, carrying Anchises on his back, tells us that there's some things you can take from your past, the gods that will be a part of that. He's leading Ilias or Ascanius by the hand. There's, of course, the future being taken into the future. And then he's going to leave Creusa in the end. That is to say, there's just some things you can't take with you. Namely, she would symbolize his home in his homeland. Of course, we would be remiss if we didn't say out loud that the Trojan horse, as it came to be called, this large wooden badger, to quote Monty Python's Holy Grail, the Trojan horse, this obviously is the symbol of all symbols. They invite it into the city. It's built big so you can't get it into your city because it's such a good luck charm. Well, we can tear down our walls for that. The dark ironies are next, obviously. Right? The Trojans should have suspected, and yet they didn't suspect. Right? Notice another irony. Venus blames the gods, not Helen, not Paris. The judgment of Paris is all set up by her. Dark irony. Another final irony is, of course, Sinon. We have, in many ways, I have argued, the birth of modern skepticism right here in Sinon. It's all right there. So easy to see, so hard to comprehend when it's happening, right? How can you tell when someone is lying to you versus not? Not lost on Shakespeare. So many of his great villains, we think obviously of Iago and Othello, who are really good at lying. The better the liar, Machiavelli said, let's jump to 3:8, the better the liar, then obviously the better the leader. Or think about how Shakespeare plays the game in Julius Caesar with Brutus. Et tu, Brute is, of course, so powerful because of that suggestion that I can't believe you, right? Especially if you do buy into that one conspiracy that Brutus was Jace's son. In the Iliad, of course, you have the descriptions of Achilles as a hero in the Iliad versus Pyrrhus, our hero in the Aeneid. In the Odyssey, notice you have Aeneas as hero versus Odysseus as hero. Aeneas is, again, very much about coming back to take care of his father. But at the end of the Odyssey, Odysseus seems to want to cause his father some pain before he finally makes his disclosure. What is for you the best text which shows total devastation of a city or a people or a nation? What's the video game that for you that works? What's great works of art? Just Google some of this, Google image some of this, and be stunned by the many, many representations of Aeneid 2. Finally, at 3b, well, what about putting Creusa behind and leaving her? Do you think that's intentional? And maybe it would be too hard to travel with her, and so he's playing that game. What's going on? Why is he not focused on this? Maybe Virgil does need her gone, right, for his myth to work. How about this one? Do you see Aeneas as a hero in this story thus far? How about this one? How can you trust the gods when they're the ones that let you down? The theodicy question that we will come back to when we study Milton's Paradise Lost. Well, the story now literally continues, right? This is Virgil's Odyssey story. Aeneas now will literally retrace much of Odysseus' travels in Book 3 as we get there. And again, just to remind, Dido is hearing this story, but is she really listening? Or is it true? Love is blind. All right, let's work with Book 3 and the end of Aeneas' story. I hope you're enjoying this as much as am I. Thank you.